Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you're able to join us this evening, and we were really delighted about the number of people who were interested in our event. It's been really positive. We hope you all might have had a chance to look at the online exhibition, but if you haven't, you'll get a good taste this evening and you can explore at your leisure when you're at home. So first things first, a few introductions. So I'm going to pop myself up. Hello. So I'm Gail Chapman. I'm the Public Programs Officer, and along the bottom of the screen we have from left to right, hopefully it's the same for everyone else, Sarah Lowry, our Oral History Officer, Katie Birkwood, our Rare Books and Special Collections Librarian, Felix Lancashire, our Assistant Archivist, Larry Jones, our Senior Curator, and Sarah Backhouse, our Exhibitions Officer. So this evening, they're all going to be speaking either in video or in person, and they'll all be live for the Q&A afterwards. Before we head into the presentations, I'm going to do a quick plug because you might all rush off at the end and I don't get a chance. We'd love it if you have the option, we'd be really appreciative if you'd be willing to support us. It's been a really difficult year for charities and museums, as you can imagine. And so we have set up a little page where you can donate. 50p would be fine. Anything you can would be lovely. I've just popped the link in the chat as well, so you can find out more. Please, of course, visit our online exhibition. I will be pinging links to it throughout the session as people are speaking. And keep a lookout for some upcoming events. Our next RCP Unseen event is going to be a talk by Wendy Moore about Endell Street, her new book, which is about the woman who ran Britain's trailblazing military hospital in World War I. So that's in March, and it's gone live today, so you can now book onto that event from our website. You can also enjoy, hopefully, a fun transcribathon in March. For those of you who don't know what it is, which was me a few weeks ago, it's basically a chance to take part in helping us transcribe one of our wonderful historic recipe books. And it's not just us who's taking part. We're joining forces with the Wellcome Collection, who are also putting one of their recipe books out for transcribing. And it's all being looked after by the Early Modern Recipe Online Collective, who are organising all the events and activities. So that will be on 4th March, and there'll be more information coming out about that on our website and social media soon. And finally, I've got permission to let you in on a little secret. We are going to be launching some expert guided virtual tours of the RCP building with all sorts of interesting history, the kind of thing we used to do in person, can't do in person right now, but you will get a chance to book on one of those soon. So there'll be more information about that in February. So keep a lookout on our website. And I think that's probably enough of hearing from me, and we should hand over to some people who know more about what they're talking about than I do. And we'll go to Larry Jones, our Senior Curator, who's going to set the scene for tonight's event.
Hello everyone, so thank you for joining us. I'm just going to give you a brief sort of contextual bit about the RCP and about the museum and where we fit within things, and then I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's doing an intro about the exhibition itself. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the RCP is a medical charity that represents about 38,000 doctors worldwide. The core mission is to improve patient health and reduce illness, but as well as being a modern healthcare charity working to raise standards and to support the medical workforce, it's also an organisation with a 500-year history, which is where all of us who are here tonight come in. So this history is looked after by the archive, library and museum teams, which we're all part of. And we care for a huge range of collections, which you can see samples of in RCP. So if you have a look online, that's what you'll be seeing. And these collections that cover a huge range of things. So we have rare books, we have artwork, medical instruments, silverware, letters, manuscripts, recorded interviews, sort of you name it, we've probably got an example of it. And these collections cover both the history of the Royal College of Physicians itself, but also more generally the history of medicine as well. In sort of what seems strange to call normal times now, since it's been almost a year, but you know, back then and hopefully in the future, these are all of our collections are available for research. They're displayed around our Regent's Park building, and they're also used in our exhibition and events programs, which are,
Sorry, Larry, I'm just diving in to interrupt. You're a little bit quiet for some people. I'm so sorry.
Any better?
Is that better, everyone?
If I keep talking, is that better? Okay, I can't actually see the chat at the moment, but prod me if not.
Okay, if anyone's still having trouble, please let us know. So sorry to interrupt you there, Larry.
No, it's, it's the balance between the feedback and the actually being able to hear me clearly.
It's much better now.
Okay, good. Yes, so the collections are used for various things, research, obviously visiting, exhibitions and events. And as we were sort of chatting about before this started, we've been moving with the times, and because we can't do in-person events at the moment or in-person exhibitions, we have now moved online. We're hoping to be able to put RCP Unseen on physically at some point, but we don't know what's happening yet, as you know, no one does. But we're really pleased to be able to share it with you online, and I'm also really pleased that you've also, you know, come along this evening to listen to us talk about some of our favourite objects, and hopefully it's going to be really interesting and you'll enjoy yourself a lot. And on that note, I'm going to pass over to Sarah Backhouse, our exhibitions officer, who's done a recorded introduction to our exhibition, RCP Unseen.
I'm just going to load up Sarah's presentation for us. Here we go.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the opening event for the Royal College of Physicians' new online exhibition, RCP Unseen. We're delighted that you're able to join us this evening as we celebrate the opening of this new online exhibition. Now, as you can imagine, we've had to do things slightly differently this year. For the majority of the past year, our archive, library and museum teams have all been working from home. And this has presented some pretty big challenges when it comes to thinking about and planning a new exhibition, mainly because we haven't been able to get our hands on our objects. However, working from home has given us a really great opportunity actually to really get to know our collections and to delve deeply into our online databases. And in doing so, we have discovered objects we never knew we had, things that have never been on display before, or perhaps not for a very long time, and also quite a lot of interesting things that you would never expect to be part of a medical collection. So our rare books librarian, our archivists, our oral history officer and our museum team have all come together to work on this wonderful project in which we essentially show you our favourite objects from our collections. There will be some familiar themes that you might have come across before. In particular, we look at the tools that doctors have used in diagnosing and treating their patients. We also look at teaching. Now, the Royal College of Physicians has always been involved in teaching across the 500 years it's been in existence, and this is a major theme of the exhibition. But there are also some new themes as well. RCP Unseen also has given us a really great opportunity to explore all of our collections across the last 500 years. This is because there are no boundaries in this exhibition. We just want to show you interesting things that you may not have seen before and hope that you learn some new interesting things about medical objects and also non-medical objects. But also in itself, it's interesting to know, why did doctors collect these things that are not related to their profession? So in a way, this is new sort of territory for us. It's an exhibition about our favourite objects, and we really hope that you enjoy them too. So do have a very good evening. Thank you very much for listening, and I really hope that you enjoy exploring our new exhibition, RCP Unseen. Good night.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah is able to be with us this evening for the Q&A as well, so she will be joining us later on live to answer any questions you might have. So now on to our next speaker. I'm going to bring up Felix's presentation. I'm going to pop him up on the screen. Ta-da! And hand over to Felix.
Great, thank you, Gail. So hopefully people can hear me. If you want to move my face to probably, well, if you can move it right out of the way of the presentation, then do, or just the bottom left or bottom right of the presentation, so I'm not in the way. So I'm the Assistant Archivist at the RCP, And for our exhibition, I have chosen a few objects, but including the ones I'm going to talk about tonight, which are a couple of items from our collection of personal papers of a guy called Alan Nabarro. And this is a picture of Alan here. He lived from 1914 to 1977. He lived in North London his whole life. He was a solicitor, a husband and father of two, and he also worked for a number of charities, particularly diabetes organizations, locally in this country and also around the world. In this picture, he's speaking at a conference in Buenos Aires, a diabetes conference. And Alan himself was diagnosed with diabetes when he was 7 years old in 1921, and lived with the condition his whole life. The reason that we have his papers is that we collect records that represent the development of the medical specialties that the RCP represents. So that includes endocrinology, which is conditions related to hormones, of which diabetes is one. So the papers in Alan's collection are things that he kept himself throughout his life. His wife Vera then kept them, and then their children very kindly and thoughtfully donated them to us so that we can share them with you and with the world. So as I say, Alan was diagnosed with diabetes when he was 7 in 1921. There was at that time no effective treatment for diabetes. Most children, when they were diagnosed, didn't live longer than a year after diagnosis. So at this time, it really was a death sentence, horrible to say. So it was devastating news for Alan's family. And he got sicker and sicker, and there was apparently nothing that could be done. But fate intervened in two ways. Firstly, the timing. So this is 1922 now. And also the fact that Alan's uncle, David Nabarro, happened to be a physician. And he was aware of research being done in Toronto, Canada, and also in Santa Barbara in California, research into using the hormone insulin for treating diabetes. And he telegrammed experts around the world to ask for help with Alan. And we've got a lot of these telegrams, or at least the slips that you would fill in for the person in the post office or wherever to wire the telegram off, including this one here that you can hopefully see on screen now. So this is a telegram that David Nabarro sent to the researchers at Santa Barbara, requesting help for Alan. Try and move my own face now. Oh, it's gone anyway. Oh no. So here we are. This is the power of archives. We have this family's situation from 100 years ago made tangible for us today in paper and ink. Can you supply sufficient insulin immediately for treatment of my boy, 8 years old? Now, remember, this is Alan's uncle talking here, not his dad. So I think he's justifiably sort of implying that it is his son, just to convey the emotional urgency that he's feeling. Serious case, cable when mailing with full instructions, payment guaranteed. I think that bit adds such an extra sting of urgency as well. You know, he's saying we'll pay whatever it takes. Just please send the insulin as soon as you can. Agonizingly, the reply came back saying that the insulin was not yet ready for distribution, and we can all relate to that at the moment, right? Waiting for the COVID vaccine to be tested, to be certified as safe, and then to be rolled out. And we're all having to wait for it. But Alan couldn't wait. He was desperately ill. Luckily, one of the other experts that Uncle David had telegrammed, a doctor called Dr. DeVos, possibly DeVos or DeVos, in Brussels, in Belgium, And Dr. Devos travelled from Brussels to London to see if anything could be done for Alan. He put Alan on what Alan later calls a starvation diet. So Alan could only eat one meal of spinach and cream once a week for a year, until finally in 1923, when insulin was ready for the public to use. And then Alan was prescribed insulin, and he became one of the very first people in the UK to use insulin to manage his condition. So he survived to not only his 8th and then 9th birthday, but also to his 13th birthday. And this is a document created by Alan himself for his bar mitzvah. He made lots of these recipes and diet sheets, and we have lots of them in the collection, the Alan Nabarro papers. So he made them for everyday use and for special occasions, including the bar mitzvah. And they list the amount of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that he can have in a day. And you can imagine, can't you, that making a document like this, being able to control his diet after that year of just one meal of spinach per week, it would have been incredibly significant to Alan, very empowering to take back control of his life like this, his diet, represented in documents like these. And he's hung on to them throughout his whole life. So they obviously meant something to him. So we know from the rest of his papers that he did take a very active interest in managing his own condition. He collected literature about diabetes. He wrote back and forth to his physician, Dr. Harrison, with questions about managing his disease or his condition. And in one of his letters that he written as an adult, he refers back to a situation that occurred when he was 11 years old, and he was in a restaurant toilet injecting himself with insulin. And a man approached him, and not clear exactly what happened, but it was a very frightening situation for Alan. Alan felt very challenged, felt that the man was being aggressive. And he told Dr. Harrison about this, and Dr. Harrison made him a certificate for that would explain that he took insulin to manage his diabetes, that Alan could carry with him at all times, as a sort of precursor to modern day insulin passports that people carry that tell people what to do if they're found ill or unconscious. And it was perhaps or probably experiences like that one as a child that inspired Alan to want to raise awareness of diabetes, to help other people living with the condition and to combat ignorance in the general public about it. So when he was 21, he joined the British Diabetic Association, which later became Diabetes UK, and travelled around the world speaking about diabetes and helping people out. So I've called the presentation "Beating the Odds" because Alan beat the odds throughout his life. They thought he was only going to live a year when he was 7, but he lived on, and then he then became one of the first people to live for 50 years with the condition, with diabetes. He was awarded a medal by an organization called the Joslin Center in America. And after he died, the Diabetes UK founded their own medal for people that had lived for 50 years or longer with diabetes, called the Alan Nabarro Medal, and that medal is still awarded today. So I think I'll stop there and let the next person take over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Felix. We've already had a question in, but I've said we'll save it till the Q&A at the end. So I've made a note of that so that we can ask you when we get to that part. Okay, let's move on now to Larry. So I'm just popping up Larry's presentation, and Larry, take it away.
Great. So I'm going to tell you, shout if my sound's dodgy. Hopefully this is in the right place. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Simons Collection, which is a collection of medical history items which were collected by a couple called Cecil and Jean Simons over many years. Let's move slides. And this collection has been on loan to the RCP for a couple of decades almost, until it was donated to us officially in 2018 via the Cultural Gift Scheme, which was, a really exciting thing for us, because that means that it's officially recognised by the government as being an important collection of cultural objects. And because it's such an important donation, I wanted to make sure that some of these items featured in the exhibition. So you'll find them in the collecting today section, which talks about how we're still, actively collecting things related to the RCP and to medical history. So the Simons collection ranges from the Roman period. You can see these spoons on the left they are Roman, right up until the 20th century, but it focuses on the Georgian era. So Georgian era, so 1714 to the 1830s, and it includes a huge number of things from feeding cups to bloodletting equipment and Victorian face masks, which is what the other image that you can see here is, which I included because it seems fairly topical at the moment. And this collection reflects a time when the powers of doctors were really limited. So before anyone knew about germs, before we had antibiotics, there was, actually not that much that a doctor could practically do for you. And it was also a time before the NHS, which meant that many people couldn't afford formal medical care. And so the way in which most people would have been cared for when they were sick was actually just at home by your family, friends, or maybe a nurse. And that is sort of the area that the Simons collection is particularly strong in. So for the rest of my little section, we're going to have a bit of an interactive. Gail, if you could put up the first quiz, please. So I'm going to show you 3 different items from the Simons collection, which I wasn't able to include in the online exhibition. And I'd like you to have a look at the image in front of you and guess which of the, what is it? There should be an image and 3 options in front of you. So what we're looking at.
Has that gone up for everyone? Sorry, I'm just double checking. We haven't done a quiz before.
Put in the chat if it's not, but I'm also going to describe and read out the options. So if not, you can kind of have a think about it. So what we're looking at now is made of silver. It's sort of elongated. It's got a stem. It's got a flap on the top, and you can't see very well, but the handle has a hole through it. And I'd like you to guess, what is this for? Is it for A, propping the mouth open, B, avoiding a bad taste, or C, eating cold food? So I'm just going to give you enough time till I've spoken through, because I don't have much time. But if you vote, hopefully you voted now, because I'm going to tell you about it. Oh, and it's not popping up. Okay.
I'm not sure if it gave people enough time to have a go. So do you want to restart the quiz, and we'll see if we can do that again?
Okay.
Start quiz again. Let's see if this works.
Oh,
okay.
It always works so well in testing. And
okay, we've started the quiz again, so hopefully it should have appeared this time. Last time it didn't appear for me, and this time it is.
Right. So, okay. Yes. Good. It's telling me that people
are taking part. Voting. Excellent.
Good. Yes. Okay. Well, I'll just give you it's on 23. I'll give you up to 30 seconds, because this was the first one, and obviously assuming that it would work smoothly was too much to hope for. Right. Okay. I'm going to end the quiz now. So those of you who voted for number 2, avoiding a bad taste, were right. So this is a castor oil spoon, and castor oil was used as a laxative and sometimes to induce labour in pregnant people. But the problem with it is it tastes really disgusting. So the way this spoon works, the flap on the sort of bowl section lifts up so you can put the oil in. And then you put your thumb over the hole that's in the end of the handle, which creates a vacuum so that the oil won't come out. Put it in the person's mouth, and then when you take your thumb off, the air rushes in and pushes the oil down their throat, which means that they can effectively take it without really tasting it, so avoiding the disgusting taste. Great. Can we have the next one, please, Gail?
Okay, the next quiz. I might just, yeah, is that loaded? Ta-da! It's up.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay. So we're looking at a wooden kind of syringe type thing. And I'd like you to tell me what part of the body you think this was used on. So you have, again, 3 options. The first is bottom, the second is ear, and the third is nose. And give you a few more seconds. It looks like,
Oh, we have a lot more takers for this one.
yeah, the numbers on my screen are being really funny, so I'm not quite sure how many people are doing it and aren't. But that, I think that's, I'm gonna just decree that is long enough for pausing and revealing the answer. So for this one, this is actually, which anyone who knows me will have probably guessed, number 1, bottom. This is a rectal ointment introducer, so it would have been used to apply ointment to the rectum. You can see that the sort of pointy end, as it were, has got holes in, and that's so that the ointment can be pushed out. And the handle has dosing markers, so when you're filling it, you know quite how much you're putting in and how much you're pushing out again. So just to lower the tone a little bit there. And can we have the last one, please, Gail?
Give it a moment.
Yeah, they do take a little bit to load.
Okay, I think that's started now.
Oh, I can't see it this time, but
It might take a minute. Can everyone see that, or do we need to restart the quiz? Don't think anyone's taking part, so
yeah.
No, they are. Oh, excellent, perfect. Just my slow computer.
I'll see if I can remember what options I put then. So we're looking at a sort of dark wooden item with those pointy bits in the middle, actually a lot of small metal spikes that are set into the top of it, and it's got a small lid. I still can't see it. So the options are, what was this used for? Was it used for, I can only remember 2 of them actually. So Gail, can you see it? Can you read them out?
I can't see it either.
I can see it.
Excellent, Katie. Thank you. Please
okay,
do.
So your 3 options for this object are A, stimulating muscles, B, vaccination, or C, distracting you from pain.
Great. So hopefully our flailing then has given you all time for it to load and to have a guess, because I'm going to end the quiz now and tell you that I still can't see it, so I'm not entirely sure, excuse me, which number it was, but someone said it could be a tickle stick. That is true, but I think it'd be a little bit more vicious than that. So the correct answer for this is for distracting from pain. This is a counter irritator, and basically does exactly what it sounds like. So it would be used for, if something on you was hurting, you use those spikes, it irritates it, and that pain distracts you from whatever else is bothering you. I like to think of it as if you've hit your funny bone, and it's really hurting, you sort of sometimes tap your other elbow a little bit to distract from it.
Wow.
Yeah. So sorry for the technical sort of difficulties with that. I hope you enjoyed that slightly interactive section. This is just me being able to show you a really small part of a fantastic collection and able to show you some of the historic items we have, but we do still collect sort of contemporary items, more modern things, and I think that is what Sarah Lowry is going to talk to us a little bit about now, on more sort of modern side of things.
Thanks, Larry. Perfect. Okay, I'm just going to swap you out. There we are. So now we have Sarah Lowry, our oral history officer, up on screen, and she's going to talk to you about listening in at the Sound Archive.
Thank you very much, Gail. So yes, my name's Sarah Lowry, and I look after the oral history collection at the Royal College of Physicians. Our current project has been running for about 6 years, and we have about 80 recordings in the collection. But our recordings actually go back much before that, and we go back even to people like Lord Moran, who is probably not somebody who would usually be classified as unseen. I think he was rather a visible person, but one of his recordings is in this current exhibition. Anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit more about emotions in oral history, and particularly about exam stress, because my colleagues asked me to find lots of extracts about exam stress and nerves for RCP Unseen, of which we have very many actually in the oral history recordings. It's not very easy to get doctors to open up about their emotions in oral history interviews. Understandably, it's not really a profession that wears their heart on their sleeves very much. And they do have a bit of a tendency to bring their public-facing persona along to the recording sessions. This doesn't mean, of course, that they don't tell you many, many really fascinating things. Of course they do. It just means that sometimes it takes a little bit of extra patience and a lot of listening to get people to perhaps talk about their often unseen emotions. When people do start opening up, you can feel that situation change and you never quite know what to expect. Sometimes people will tell you things that make you smile, that you can really relate to. So, for example, a really eminent physician who was telling me about how when he first called his future wife to ask her for a date, he was incredibly nervous because he thought she was going to say no. Or somebody talking about feeling real trepidation and taking their boss to the pub to ask if they thought they might have a permanent job in the future because he really wanted to take out a mortgage on his first house. Or even something like just getting duped by a second-car salesperson that, you know, would make us all smile and relate to. Sometimes emotions in oral histories of this kind are just expressed by a waver in the voice. You just hear a waver in the voice. So perhaps when people are talking about really important medical developments which help them save lives of people who just couldn't be saved before, linking back to Felix's presentation. So Norman Jones talking about kidney dialysis and setting up kidney dialysis units. His voice just wavers when he talks about how 21 years after they set up the very first unit, 5 of their 7 patients actually came back to an anniversary celebration. And his voice just breaks at the end, and it's incredibly moving because you get that sense of how emotional that particular memory is for him. And sometimes people tell you about situations which you just can't relate to at all and feel incredibly grateful, actually, that you can't relate to them. That just really underpins the fact that medicine is definitely a vocation. So I've heard stories of people talking about as junior doctors, you know, just sitting and weeping in their rooms because they've been up all night trying to find a rare blood type for a very ill patient and just really struggling with that. Or perhaps talking about a dilemma of whether or not to tell a patient that they had cancer in the years before that was really accepted practice, and thinking, you know, am I going to really incur the wrath of my boss if I do this? But, you know, I really think it's the right thing to do. And when people tell you about things like that as well, it's incredibly moving. But as I said, one of the things that people really don't seem to find it difficult to open up about is exam nerves. Lots and lots of people talk about exam nerves in their interviews. And actually, for a certain generation of physicians, the ones I think that took the MRCP before the Reformation, I think being scared out of your wits by vivas and practical exams seems to have been almost a rite of passage for the profession. And people tell you about it a lot. Again, a lot of these just make you smile, and you can really relate to them, even if you've never taken medical exams yourself. I think a former treasurer saying he was seized by icy dread around his heart one time when going into his local church hall to vote, actually years after he'd taken his MRCP exam. But the 2 people standing behind the trestle table and looking at him expectantly as he approached him with a piece of paper in his hand reminded him so powerfully of the Path Viva that he just got incredible nerves back again. And that fear of icy fear around your heart, I think, is something that even I can remember now very clearly just from, you know, doing exams myself. Or another former officer who said he picked up a pathology specimen and it was incredibly ancient and there were just bits of matter floating around in it like a snow globe, and he wasn't able to identify it and failed his Path Viva on the first time. These things, you know, make you smile. But sometimes people tell you things about their exam nerves which make you reflect and really think. This is what I want to just play you one clip to finish with. That illustrates that. So this is Linda Luxon, former treasurer of the RCP, talking about taking her clinical finals at the end of her degree, and a very kind examiner and also a very kind patient who helped her to settle her nerves. Gail, could we possibly play? hopefully.
I have to admit, it's almost cheating, so I don't like to admit it. One of the long cases, which was a woman that had an abdominal complaint, I think I was the only woman that had come through that day. She obviously decided she wanted to help me, so she was very forthcoming and exactly what was wrong with her, exactly what the signs were. Fortunately, I think I did pick them up, but she was very nice. So it was fine, but I hated doing exams. I was never a confident person in exams. And one of the other things that happened was one of the short cases was somebody with thyrotoxicosis, had a big goiter and was shaking and poppy eyes, and I really wasn't in any doubt what this woman had and how we should treat it. That was all fine. But in the horror of exams, I said completely the opposite. I said, this woman's got myxedema. And it was only because I was absolutely panic-stricken. And the examiner looked at me and said, are you sure that's what this lady's got? Unfortunately, again, I suddenly realised what I'd done and said, no, I don't mean that at all. She's got thyrotoxicosis, and then said all the correct things. And he was very nice. He smiled and said, I thought that's what you meant.
Sorry, just need to unmute myself again to finish. So I think that's just a small reflection and just make me think that, we may all try and keep our emotions hidden quite a lot of the time, and we might have various reasons for that. We might be trying to give reassurance to someone who's depending on us, or we might be trying to show that we're in control, or we might even be trying to hide ourselves from a nosy oral historian. But nevertheless, I think we can all benefit, from the people around us looking under that veneer from time to time and checking in on us. And, sometimes kind words at the right time can go a long way towards getting us through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our final presentation before the Q&A. It's 20 to 7, so hopefully we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. Sorry, Katie, keep it to 5 minutes, please. And here is Katie Birkwood, our Rare Books librarian.
Hi, thanks, Gail. As ever, please shout out in the chat if you can't hear me very well, and one of my colleagues will let me know and I'll try and be louder. So, as Gail says, I'm the Rare Books librarian at the RCP, and the book I've chosen to highlight today, out of the books that have gone into Unseen, is a book by a man called William Piso called De Medicina Brasiliense, a book published in the year 1648. The title means On the Medicine of Brazil, and the book contains chapters on climate, local diseases, venomous creatures and their antidotes, and the medicinal properties of the local plants of Brazil. It was published together with another book by a man called Georg Markgraf called Historia Rerum Naturalium Brasilii, which means A Natural History of Brazil. So they're ideal companions, the two books. Here we can see a snippet of the title page showing a bountiful scene of plants, fruits and animals decorating the title text. And what really caught my eye about this book, the first day I happened to just pick it off the shelf at random to have a look and see what was in it, was the amazing pictures that it contains. So on this page, we can see two different plants. The first is a climber, Lantana trifolia, which has heart-shaped green leaves, ball-shaped yellow flowers, and clusters of dark green berries. The second, on the right, is the fruit of the pineapple plant, believe it or not. It's rather narrower and spikier than you might expect from the pineapples in our shops today, and it's nestling right in the middle of a cluster of narrow green leaves. Here's another example, which shows the tree, fruit and flower of the papaya plant. I have to say I'd never really thought about where papayas came from until I saw this picture. The tree has maple-like leaves and is heavily hung with these pale green fruit, and a cross-section of the plant is also shown, showing a white interior studded with seeds. Now, these illustrations were printed in black ink, just like the text of the book, and the images were made by being carved out of blocks of wood. They're wood block prints. Then after printing, each image was carefully painted in full colour by hand. The time and skill necessary to do this would have made it a really expensive and luxury book to buy. Markgraf's Natural History covers plants, animals, birds, quadrupeds, snakes, insects, and geographical information about Brazil. It's really a kind of encyclopedia. And in my opinion, the most marvelous bit of the book are the illustrations of sea creatures. And this is just a small selection. They really took my breath away the first time I saw them. So we've got a dark blue ray with white spots, a couple of different crabs in amazing colours, and then fish in all sorts of different colours, blues and yellows and pinks, with shimmering silver and gold scales on their body. The book is both beautiful and scientifically important. It has really been described as the first comprehensive natural history of South America, and Willem Piso, one of the authors, as one of the founders of the study of tropical medicine. But it's also important to understand and acknowledge the circumstances of its production. Piso and Markgraaf were both employed by a man called Johan Moritz van Nassau-Siegen, who was the governor of Dutch colonized Brazil from 1637 to 1644. Piso was official physician to the colony, and Markgraaf was employed as a naturalist and astronomer. The Dutch, in common with many Western European countries of the time, sent expeditions to America and the East Indies to seek new trade routes, to find new economically useful products to trade, and to control the production and trade of already popular commodities. These commercial drivers came at the expense of the indigenous peoples and natural ecosystems of the lands that were settled. This scientific treatise on plants and animals was produced as part of this colonial endeavour. It documents the plants and animals of lands the Dutch believed that they had conquered, and plants and animals that they thought, frankly, that they might be able to make a profit from. So let's go back to the title page I showed at the start. I was rather cheeky before, and I cropped it very carefully. Here's the full version. The design of this image, when seen in full, makes it clear that this work is part of the colonial project, and that it takes not only the flora and fauna of the colonized lands as its subject, but also the indigenous peoples of the region, who suffered disease and exploitation as the result of Western European exploration, as we tend to call it, of their lands. These people are depicted as savages, and as objects of study to be treated on a par with the animals and plants described in the book. They're kind of presented as part of this bounty ripe for harvest. Now, this is undoubtedly a beautiful book and a scientifically important one, but I think it's really important for us also to acknowledge the circumstances of its creation and use, and the fact that it comes not without connections to the wider history of Europe and colonized lands. So why do we have this book in the RCP library? Well, it's because information about previously unknown diseases and illnesses and the treatments that could be derived from new plants was of great interest to physicians of 17th century England. But it's also an example of the way physicians' remits and interests spread much more widely than you might think they would in the 17th century. It's one of thousands of books that we preserve today, which reflect that physicians were interested in travel, trade, economics, literature, music, almost anything you can think of under the sun. And it's a great joy to have a book like this in a collection that we can use to talk to people about the history of medicine, science, and the world as a whole. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. That was really fascinating. And thank you, everyone. So let's see if I can do this. Oh, Katie, all on her own. Sorry. There we go. That's the right button. So now you can see all of us, the whole team. So just a quick reminder for those of you who might not have been here right at the beginning. We have with us this evening Sarah Lowry, our Oral History Officer, Katie Birkwood, as you just heard there, Rare Books and Special Collections Librarian, Felix Lancashire, Assistant Archivist, Larry Jones, Senior Curator, and Sarah Backhouse, our Exhibitions Officer. So now, after all those wonderful presentations, which I thank you greatly for, we'd like to open the floor to questions. As we said at the beginning, if you could please put questions in the chat Q&A box, that would really help us. We have too many people to be able to allow people to come on and speak individually. So if you wouldn't mind, please putting it into the chat box for us. One thing that we actually had in the middle, so he got in first, was a gentleman named Steve had a question during your presentation, Felix. He was wondering if it was similar to a ketotic diet. I apologize if I've pronounced that wrong, to the diet that you were describing.
Yes, well, so I should say I'm in no way any kind of dietary expert or expert on diabetes. And it's lucky that I had warning of this question, because I've been looking it up in the meantime. And well, either I've looked up the wrong thing or Google's suggested something else for me. I realise I've got a page on ketogenic diet here, so I don't know if that's anything. Anyway, but I got the impression that this ketogenic diet or ketogenic diet was all about carbs, which yeah, so of course diabetes is about carbs are a crucial food stuff to control if you've got diabetes. So possibly there is crossover there. But yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard of a ketogenic diet before tonight, I'm afraid. So I don't have much to say about it.
Pretty on the spot there, Felix. Okay, hopefully that's given a bit more information. We've had another question in the Q&A. So it's from Bryony, who firstly wants to say thank you, really well considered talks. Loves to get the personal reflections on objects that you've chosen, something that curators often admit in the accepted norm of objective anonymous exhibition labels. So she wonders, with that, having had that feeling to your exhibition this time, might this influence your approach to future exhibitions? So I don't know if Sarah, maybe you want to kick this one off?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the question, Bryony. I'm glad you enjoyed all the talks. I think it's a really interesting thing to be able to do, and certainly having this type of exhibition means that we have been able to put our personal spin on what we're displaying. I guess it all depends on what the narrative of the exhibition is and what we're trying to do. It's quite a hard balance, but I think certainly it's something we could think about in the future. Sorry, that's kind of evaded your question slightly. I don't know if Larry has any thoughts about that.
I think, as you say, it would depend on exactly what exhibition we were talking about. Obviously, it's a really serious subject. Our personal thoughts on that are probably not appropriate, but even if not directly in the exhibition text, as it were, I think this kind of way of exploring things is something that I'd maybe like to do a bit more in future, particularly as this event seems to be quite popular, depending on the feedback we get. And it's also just really nice to be able to tell people things about the objects that we're really excited about. So, yeah.
Can I come in on that as well?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Yeah, so I've often found with exhibitions that there's a real difference between kind of what goes in the cases and the text that goes with objects in the cases, because you're very constrained by space, and also kind of wanting to have a kind of an authoritative text that is there for people to read themselves. And then what you can do when you're speaking to people directly, either at events or in tours. So I've been surprised myself in the past when doing exhibition tours by the emotional response I've had to some of the objects and themes as I've been talking to people. So a couple of years ago, we had an exhibition about women in medicine, and some of the tours I gave as part of that exhibition were some of the best I think I've ever experienced, because the people who came on the tours were so interested in the subject and kind of so personally connected to the stories of the women we were talking about. And I could really connect to those stories as well. So talking about some of the portraits we had on display and the stories of those women's lives felt very, very different to that just writing facts on a caption, although caption writing is much more than that. I felt that kind of there was something about the personal connection I had to the stories and the personal connection with talking to people directly that made it a very different experience, and I think kind of changed my thoughts about how we put things on display and the experiences people might be having independently of me giving them a tour as well.
Thank you. Just before I go on to the next question, there's two people who have their hands up. If you have a question, if you wouldn't mind popping them in the Q&A or the chat, the Q&A preferably. We unfortunately can't turn anyone else's camera or microphone on for this event. But we did have another question in the meantime. I'm going to mispronounce your name. I do apologize. Krishnadio has asked, did doctors use narrative medicine? So I don't know who wants to jump in on that one.
Could you maybe put a little bit more in the chat about, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by narrative medicine. So they may have done, but I'm not sure.
Perhaps mean case studies?
That terminology, yeah.
Is it perhaps case studies or?
I can just fill in a bit maybe while we're waiting for a bit more information about what narrative medicine, the definition. Just
patient stories. So whether they look back, I guess, at patient stories to help with diagnosis. Would that be?
I'm not sure whether this actually answers the question, but something I was very interesting to read was about Cicely Saunders, who obviously was the pioneer of palliative medicine. And she did say that she used to basically do oral history interviews. She used to go and sit with her patients and just listen to them talking about their lives, and talk about how sort of beneficial she felt that was. And a lot of people in their interviews as well do talk about, you know, the incredible pressures of the times. You know, you can only see your patients for a certain amount of time, sort of 10 minutes if you're lucky, and then people are out again. And actually how incredibly valuable it is to sit and listen to people whenever you get the chance, and how lucky people feel when, you know, as a doctor, if they get the chance to talk to their patients for longer. So I don't know whether that was the kind of thing that you were interested in.
I think so. He said exactly. So I think that was a great example. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. We haven't got any more questions come up yet in the Q&A or chat. So I actually had one of myself for you guys. So was there anything that you desperately wanted to put in that you had to edit out because we didn't have space, that you would like an opportunity to tell us about a little bit about just now?
I can't think of anything off the top. Do you mean for today or for the exhibition in general?
For the exhibition.
Or
did you manage to cram everything in that was exciting?
Yeah.
We pretty much crammed it all in, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the benefit of this kind of exhibition, where because, like Sarah said at the beginning in her intro, because we are working solely within our collection, so for a bit of context for everyone, we usually borrow things from other museums to sort of supplement whatever story we were telling. But because of lockdown and because of everything that's going on, we obviously needed to just use the things that we have. And because of that, it gave us a lot more leeway than normal to just kind of structure things in the way we wanted and make sure that we could highlight things that we felt were important. And I mean, kind of the opposite of what you just asked, but I have a new favourite object because of this exhibition, which is one that Felix flagged up, which I think was the image on our intro slide. It's on the teaching case, if you have a look online, and it's this little tiny but also an enormous stack of cheat sheets from an exam where someone has copied out like a whole textbook almost and then been caught using it, and that is why we have it in the archive, and it's just amazing.
I'll pop a link in the chat where people can go and have a look at the cheat sheet. It is one of my favourite images from that as well. I was actually speaking to my parents who were studying at about the same period as that booklet, and my mum was looking at it and looking back at it and going, "Oh yes, I do remember that bit" from her notes. So, so it was it was nice to have a relatable type of objects that are in there. Okay, we haven't actually had any more questions, so if anyone has anything they would like to ask about museums or oral history or anything else we've got, please do pop them in. But whilst we're waiting, Larry, did you want to do a final round of plugging?
Yes.
So if you want to pop any last minute questions in the room chat, I know it takes a minute to type it all in, do whilst we're doing this. We'll all hang around till the very end. But in the meantime, Larry's going to do a little plug for us.
Yes, so again, just to recap what we talked about at the start. So obviously Unseen is an online exhibition at the moment, so please go and explore it online. There's lots of different things to see, and we made sure it was really image focused so that, you know, if you want, you can just skim through and look at stuff, but there's also all the information there if you would like to expand and explore in a bit more detail. We also have our upcoming events. So the Endell Street Talk is going to be really fascinating. Wendy's an excellent speaker. We've worked with her before. So, you know, please do come along for that, and keep an eye on our social media or our newsletter, which you can sign up to on the website for everything that we've got coming up, and also kind of interesting objects and kind of other things that are going on, and that goes out monthly. Please also do consider donating to us. Like Gail said, you know, we're both a charity and a museum, which are both sectors that have been really struggling during COVID, not being able to open to the public, and it's your support which allows us to put on these kind of events, which we love doing, but, you know, we need your help to be able to carry on doing that. So, you know, please do consider helping us out. And I think the last thing for me to say is just if you've enjoyed today, or actually if you haven't as well, but hopefully you have done, you will be getting a feedback form sent to the email address with which you booked, and we would really appreciate it if you could fill that in, and just, it's really short, just a couple of minutes, but to tell us what you thought and to allow us to kind of make sure that we carry on putting on good stuff and, you know, make any improvements that we need to. So thank you very much for joining us. I don't think we had any last minute questions. I can't see the chat at the moment.
We had just one thing about the transcription event. So yeah, just for that, Stella, there'll be more information coming out about it in our February newsletter. So there will be more information there, but it's basically a joint event with the Early Modern Recipe Online Collective and the Wellcome Collection. MROC are the ones who've got everything kickstarted, but they're using one of our recipe books this year, so we're very much taking part. And it'll be your chance to spend an afternoon on the 4th of March online helping transcribe one of our recipe books or one of the Wellcome Collection's recipe books, whichever one takes your fancy, to make it searchable for people in future. So it will make it much easier for people to find out information. They're quite exciting recipe books. It's Lady Sedley's medicinal recipes from the 17th century. There's some really interesting cures in there. So it should be really fun. And yeah, we'll have more information about how you can sign up and the other events that will be going on during the day in the coming weeks. So please just keep an eye out on our social media and our website, particularly in February, and we'll have a bit more information for you. Okay, hopefully that's answered all the questions. Thank you for all the lovely comments. And of course, if anyone thinks of any burning question that they didn't ask at the time, we of course always welcome inquiries to our history email, so you can always get in touch with us or just tweet. Katie's always on hand, promising here. No, one of us will get back to you. So please do just keep in touch with us. And thank you from myself to everyone who has spoken this evening. You guys have been really great. Thank you for putting the time in. And please, everyone, please go and explore the online exhibition and come and join us at another event soon. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.